We got a good one today in Yata format, so I'll change the overlay there. This was the format based around Worlds 2003. So I'll put Worlds 2003 here, which took place in the summer of 2003. And it's a really fun DM format. I think it's one of the better DM formats. I think it's one of the better Yu-Gi-Oh formats as well. So yeah, it's a fun one, and I'm glad to return to it. We're going to be having a monthly in Yata format this month because I've not finished my coverage of Lightsworn format yet, and I don't want to jump into the next format after that until I'm done with that. But I'll be trying to get the Lightsworn coverage done. Basically, I've run into an issue. So first, I had the big video that I had to put out that was like 4.5 hours long, so it took me longer than I normally expected to get that out. But now I've sort of had the issue where it doesn't seem like as many people are interested in playing Lightsworn format anymore. Like, I've asked for games a couple nights and not really received many responses. So that makes getting the games I need for a video a bit more slow. So we'll see when my next format video comes out, or when my next dual video comes out. But it should hopefully be pretty soon, because I've already got a couple of games for it. I just need like 1 or 2 more to get that going. But yeah, as Prada says, they agree that it's one of the better DM formats, and I agree with that. I think there are actually a surprisingly high number of good DM formats, which people don't really think about when they think about the era, because it's like, I feel like people look down on it as like caveman Yu-Gi-Oh, like Unga Bunga stuff, and they're like, oh, I don't want to play that. That seems like so boring compared to some of the other more modern formats. But further exploration has shown that like some of the formats actually do have some very interesting style decks that can play in different ways, even if it is slower than like an Edison deck, for instance. And they're a lot of fun. So I'm gonna get this thing started, even though we only have 7. Because it's like 1:04, so it's already like almost 5 minutes after. So, yeah, I'm just going to get this thing set up. And I'll change this to unranked. And let's get this party started. With 7, it's a little bit wonky, but it should still be fine. 7's a good number. So, yeah, Yata format Colgate. Welcome back to the stream. Yeah, we got some fun one today. Apparently, Dump Truck has a pretty sick deck that they cooked up, so I'm curious to see what that will be. But hopefully we get to see more innovation as well, beyond just what Dump's got. But yeah, it should be a fun time. Seems like there might be other stuff going on as well today. Like Clemens normally plays, but they're oh wait, no, maybe they are playing. Oh yeah, they're playing, I think. Yes, it's just Transom is. I didn't recognize the name Transom. So yeah, Clemens is playing. So yeah, we got games getting started here, and we'll see how they do. But I'm excited to dive back into Yata. The monthly tournament this month, it's going to be in Yata format. So if you want to play some Yata format, it'll be there. If you like what you see in this stream, head over to the YGO from Zero Discord server to play in that. And I'll be sort of setting that up after this locals wraps up, but it should be a lot of fun. Yeah, I don't know. Yata is definitely one of my favorite formats, and I feel like Fiber got a lot of the sort of love from this time period, with like in terms of how many tournaments go on. And I'm not trying to disparage Fiber or like take away from Fiber. I personally prefer Yata, so I'm gonna have a tournament for Yata, and hopefully people get interested in it as well. But Fiber's also a great format, so I can't really. I'm not upset about people playing Fiber. Even if Fiber wasn't a good format, I wouldn't be upset about people playing it, because I'm sort of the opinion that like the more people playing Retro Yu-Gi-Oh, whatever Retro Yu-Gi-Oh format it is better for the community as a whole. So but that being said, I think Fiber is a great format as well. But Forceful taking a Pot of Greed, probably a good choice, because Pot of Greed is a free +1. And a format like this, when there's so many powerful cards running around, you don't really want your opponent to have a free +1. Now, people might have seen this turn and been like, oh my god, Pot into Forceful, that's so toxic, and, decide not to play this format. But I think you'll see over the course of this game, I mean, maybe it will just be a blowout completely, but over the course of the game, both players have access to enough broken cards to sort of even things out. I like to view this format sort of like the syndrome meme, where it's like if everyone has superpowers, then no one does. It's sort of that way with Yata, where like if everyone had access to a critical mass of power cards, it's almost like no one really does. Well, not no one, but like it equalizes things out. So like you get, game states that do go actually quite long, and you get games that are quite interesting. So we got a tomato war going here. Maybe Juan's thing to end the tomato. No, they are going to go for another tomato. Yep. So both players are thinning out their deck a little bit and getting a search potentially at the end of it, which is pretty nice. But yeah, I agree. Yata, goated format, Colgate. I'm with you there. Sorry if my voice is kind of shot. I was out with some friends last night, so yeah, I guess my voice took the hit there. Oh, Dawn and a Reaper. Yeah, maybe not the best one to bring out off that, but I guess Reaper does at least survive, so you can switch to defense here. But yeah, honestly, yeah, Colgate says old school Yu-Gi-Oh! At its best before it's invaded by chaos, and I agree. Before this, you have Fiber, which I do like a lot, but Fiber does have double Graceful Charity, which can be a bit of a sticking point for some people. And after this, you have like Magical Scientist entering the format, which leads to a lot of cheesy decks coming out, and just a lot more fast-paced gameplay. Like I'd say that Vampire format is just a little bit too quick for some people, in terms of like what they like. But Zambira going into the Gemini Elf there, figuring like, okay, if I attacked over Zambira, then the Gemini Elf would tie this, so I don't want to do that. I just want to attack him for that. But this is a bit risky. If there's a Raigeki in Juan's possession, they can Raigeki the board and then get in with Dawn. So that's kind of rough. Yeah, so yes, as I said last time, the GKPC formats and stuff like that will come after I do some more Lightsworn games, Lightsworn videos. Unfortunately, as I mentioned at the start of the stream, it seems like not many people want to play Lightsworn format, so I've been, asking for games, but not really getting many responses. So, we'll have to see how that goes. As for whether the decks are actually good or not, I'll have to decide when I actually play them myself. But we'll see when those videos do come out. But they will come out. Don't worry. I will be releasing them at some point. It's just I do need to make some Lightsworn videos first, and unfortunately, have not been able to, get as many of those out as I'd like. But yeah, I do like Vampire format a lot, and Colgate very good Vampire Duelist, which is why they're saying that sort of thing. They also have played an Archfiend deck as well in that form. Oh, Duo here is nasty. Yeah, that's brutal. I talked a big game about this format being, a bunch of power cards balancing each other out, but, Juan is definitely in the driver's seat this game, and Clemens is sort of very much on the back foot. There are some things that Clemens can draw to sort of equalize things out a little bit. Mirage Nightmare, great way to get back into the game. But yeah, it seems like they do not have it right now. But, I mean, it seems like Juan is unable to deal with the Reaper as of yet. So, they might be in a bit of a better spot here than it looks. Yeah, I mean, as Colgate says, sometimes you have a Spirit Reaper and a Dream. Call the Haunted here, but that's going to get MST'd. So, no ability to bring out, like, maybe Injecting Fairy Lily or something like that. Although I wouldn't really bring out Injecting Fairy Lily here, as it kind of plays poorly into the board. You only have 3 activations of it, and Juan has a bunch of slots open, so they could potentially just crash into it. But yeah, Raigeki is pretty good here for Clemens, but it's also very good for Juan, so that's the problem here. Magician of Faith getting back a spell. What are they going to get back? They don't really have the best spells here, but Snatch Steal could be an option. It looks like they are going to go for Snatch Steal. Snatch Steal is a bit awkward here because you take control of like the Zambira, and you're just basically giving your opponent 3,000 life points over the course of time, just to sort of clear some of their monsters. But that is the best option for Clemens to get back here. So Snatch on what I assume will be the Zambira. They might have a Jinzo in hand or another tribute monster, because they did not commit a back row to board there. And I feel like if your opponent's used up like a Harpies, you're fine committing back row to that. But this is actually going to be a pretty big turn. So this is actually going to get a fair amount of hand rips here. One hand ripped off Dawn, another hand ripped off Reaper. Now Juan will be able to get a search off the Witch. The rip will happen before the search. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I was thinking the same thing, Colgate, that Snatch would do some stuff, but not enough. But it seems like it's doing a lot for Clemens here. This is a very big swing, and very good for Clemens here. And also look at the life point totals. Both people have like pretty high life points too. So that means that there is still a lot of game left. And hitting a reborn also very, very good. So the question remains: will Clemens do something? Where, like, are they going to commit this card in hand to board, or are they going to just keep it in hand? I feel like they maybe had the Dawn earlier, which is why they didn't commit that, because they wanted to save that for when they could actually do a crackback. But yeah, I mean, as Colgate says, just like that, we're back in it, baby. If you look at the amount of cards that both players have, Clemens kind of has 5 cards, but really kind of 4 cards to Juan's 4 cards. The Snatch is kind of like in a weird limbo state because like Zambira, does it count as Clemens' card? Does it count as Juan's card? It really depends on what Juan does to get it there. But if Juan takes it back, they will have to use a card to do that, which means that it's kind of like giving Juan just 4 cards to Clemens' 4 cards. So there's a Harpy. Oh, I thought Harpy. I think Clemens used the Harpy. Yeah, Clemens used Harpy, so that's why. I've been losing track of things, but yeah, Exiled is not really the best here. I mean, it does trade for the Reaper at least, so that is something. So this does clear Clemens' entire board, and leaves them with a Zambira on Juan's side of things. But that Zambira's at 1500 attack, so it's not really the best Zambira. Kind of just a body now. So things are pretty equal. It's basically 2-2 at this point because Zambira is not doing anything. Rhoda is going to be pretty good here for Clemens. So they can sort of search out a monster to beat over the Zambira if they want. They could also just search out a Dawn to set that. But they're going to search out the Zambira. Zambira comes down into that other Zambira. And we'll have to see. CS says, yesterday I lost hard against Burn in the Disc Commander Classic 2-0. I mean, Burn can be good in different formats. I'm not sure how good it is in PC. Like, I feel like it's kind of tricky. Like, honestly, a lot of Burn success comes down to not knowing how to play against it. And I'm not saying that as in like, oh, you need to get good, but I'm saying that in like, if it's a new quantity in a format, it can be a bit tricky to actually know how to, play against it. So going for the Gemini Crash here, that can be a bit of a risky play, but Juan's setting another now that Clemens' Harpies is gone. So, we'll have to see how that works out for them. But Clemens brings out a Witch, which is going to be very good here into an empty board. Also, we know that Clemens still has a bunch of power cards left in the deck, still have Pot, still Graceful, whereas Juan has used up those cards. So that does give Clemens a bit of an advantage here. So we do have in PC, so I believe that, yeah, we have like Chain Strike and stuff like that. So that is around. I think Chain Strike might be limited. I don't know. But we got Marshmallow in PC. So there are a fair amount of other burn cards you think of for the time period. Like Baburn is a deck that you can play in PC, for instance. I just don't know how good it is. But yeah, Baboon Burn is better, as CS says. So, yeah. Now life points are equalized too. And it's, this is interesting. This is a bit of a thing for Juan. So Yata is kind of interesting too, because like, there's a lot of things about like inevitability and stability, right? Because like as the game goes on, if you're the player who's used up your power cards earlier, then you know that your opponent's advantaged in the long run if they're able to survive your initial push. So you need to think about like, okay, I can't let my opponent stabilize here. And your opponent's like, I just need to stabilize here. And if I do that, then I'll be able to get back in the game because I'm drawing the power cards later. And that's sort of like what we're seeing here with this dynamic between Clemens and Juan. And there's Io, absolutely cracked card, stopping that Pot of Greed from getting more value here. There are some things that can give the players sort of, busted out all their power cards early, a bit of an edge later on, like Magician of Faith, for instance. But generally that's not played at more than one copy, I believe. Maybe that's changed with further deck building and experimentation, but I believe that Magician of Faith is generally a one-of. Maybe there's merit to playing like 3 of it. Magician of Faith can be a bit of a tricky card because if you're playing a ton of it, then it can get like Change of Hearted and then flipped up, so that's a bit awkward. Clemens letting the IO go, just using it as a one-off negation for the Pot, which is not a bad use of it. They're going to go for a pre-mat here, so they're getting pretty aggressive. I personally, honestly, would just go for... Okay, they're going to go for TT here, so that does blow up the board, get a Witch Search here. I personally probably just would have switched the Witch to attack into the Faith. That would be just me, but like I guess this does go very favorably for Clemens. They're able to rip away that last card in hand. It's just I probably would have saved the pre-mat. Just because like the Witch deals with them off on its own. I'm fine leaving them with 1 card for now. And keeping the IO up, shutting off like anything else my opponent can do. Mirror Force comes down and clears the Dawn. Clemens setting 1, passing back. So now they're both at 1 card each. I think, honestly, Clemens might have been in a better position here if they just kept the IO up. And, the Witch would have traded into the Mirror Force. But, I mean, the TT would have come down later, I guess. So I guess it's fair. Because we probably would have been in a similar sort of situation here, either way. But, yeah, I don't know. I'm just more of a conservative player, I think. Like, I don't necessarily, try and get too aggressive, which can be a downside. Like, I do think it's an important skill in a lot of these formats, knowing when to get aggressive, when to not. So, yeah. Big City's fun in Perfect Circle. It's just kind of an underpowered deck, I think, compared to some other stuff in the format. But it could maybe work. I could see someone piloting a build to success. Both players just having a lot of back row here. I'm curious what Clemens' set card is. Maybe a Reaper? Because I feel like if it was like Sangane, flip it up, just poke in. Maybe it's Zambira, but I feel like you wouldn't set Zambira. So I'm very curious about what that set is. Can't be Tomato because tomatoes are gone. Jinzo's going to come back off that call. It's going to be a pretty good play here from Juan. And what is that Jinzo going to do? It's just going to attack into the set. It looks like it's a Serpent. Okay, that makes some sense. Yep. Yeah, I feel like being aggressive can be good, depending on the format. I do think, like, it's generally better to be more conservative than more aggressive. Most of the time, there are some formats where being more aggressive works and some decks where being more aggressive works. But even if you are aggressive, or even if you are, like, more careful and cautious, you do need to sort of take into account, like, okay, I need to make sure that I'm taking into account when to get aggressive if I'm too cautious, or when to play cautious if I'm too aggressive. So you sort of have to balance things out with that. Change of Heart into a Reaper, so not the best for Clemens, but they're able to bring out a Jinzo of their own, and then probably pass. Yep. So if we look at what is left for Clemens to deal with that Reaper, they do have Exiled Force, probably. So Pre-Mat here is going to bring back something for Juan. Are they going to bring back a Jinzo, or are they going to bring back an Exiled Force? I might go Exile just in case there's book. But I think either one, you clear the Jinzo and you're fine. Maybe they've got another way to clear the Jinzo. So no, they're going to bring out the Jinzo there. Oh, they got snatched. That's why. Okay, yeah, this is lethal if this all goes through. I feel like if there was MST in the background, they would have used it already. So yeah, this will be Juan's game. But I think that you saw there how close that game actually was. Even though Juan did start with a lot of aggressive pushes there, and a lot of power cards. That was actually a pretty intense one, and it did come down to the wire there. Let's see what other games are going on. Oh, damn. Dumptruck lost quick. Oof, that's rough. I wanted to see what deck they were playing, because I heard it was an interesting one. Let's dive in to RunFromRed and Wagamuff. And it looks like this is on game 3, so I'm excited to see what they're playing around with. I do feel like a lot of Yata games do go to game 3, which is just very fun because it really can go either way. Some people might say that if every, match goes to game 3, then that means it's a less skillful format, because realistically, the more skilled players should be, closing out games 2-0. But there are a fair amount of 2-0s as well. I just think because the decks are very similar, right? If you have two people playing a very similar deck at a very high skill level, you will often wind up in games that are, 2-1, right? Because the deck is not doing anything to sort of advantage itself in, a given match. And if people are equivalent levels of skill, then, you're going to wind up with those sorts of scenarios. But IO shutting off the Mirage, and IO is honestly one of the better Mirage outs, because then you get to use up Mirage later as well after the IO drops. But Dust Tornado being used on the IO to shut off that Mirage, very good play there. And now GMYFS is going to lose a fair amount of cards from hand here. I mean, this Mirage is still good, though, here, because it does still draw deeper in the deck, and you are still getting value off it most of the time. Because there are cards you want in graveyard, like Sinister Serpent, that can then make the Mirage even better later on. And you're likely going to draw into MST eventually anyways. But, man, they lost a lot of good cards there. Chain of Heart, Dark Hole, Snatch. Those are some very, very good ones. But they are going to be drawing 4 more here, so they can draw into a potential MST to then, pop that Mirage and get more value there. So let's see what they do. PJ thinking here. Attacking the Witch might not be the play because it gets them another card in hand, so it sort of insulates their discard, especially if they get Serpent. But yeah, Spy gonna flip up. Probably just bring another Spy in defense. Yep, there it goes. And there is really like the debate: do you attack into Witch if you can? Do you not? I don't know. I'm not sure what I'd do here necessarily. Okay, looks like they are going to set one and pass. Okay. I think that is fine, though, because you don't want it, like, maybe they don't even have a way to get over the Witch, but either way, you don't necessarily want to thin out their deck a bit to make it more likely they draw into MST. Drew into MST anyways, unfortunately, and they've got the Raigeki there. That's going to blow up the Witch, and the Witch is going to get a search at least. It did get the Spy out of the deck earlier, so that is something as well. But yeah, it's interesting because I think Raigeki was the card they set last turn, so they drew that off of Mirage as well. So they drew Raigeki, Change of Heart, Dark Hole, Snatch in one hand. That's crazy. But yeah, the thing about what to search with the Witch, they're going to search it as Sangan, makes sense. Get another search later on. Both players are still at 8,000, and they've got about similar, hand sizes. Well, actually, they've got the same hand size, but in terms of the amount of cards they have, it's around similar. GMYFS does have a little bit more, but they've also gone through a lot more of their power cards, which make things a little bit awkward for them. Now Peter didn't really have to play around like Dark Hole, Raigeki, Change, Snatch. Potted and Graceful are also gone for GMYFS, where only Graceful's gone for PJ. PJ does seem to be playing a Gravekeeper's deck, though. Very interesting stuff that did see success in a previous tournament piloted by Alpha 2. Hades coming down. Hades, not a typical card to see in these decks, but very good when it does come down. Can stop things like Sangan, Witch, etc. And we do know that PJ does with Sangan, so if that Hades is able to come in and shut down that Sangan, they could be very good. What is GeoMyFS going to search here? They're going to search out Tomato as well. Keep up the field presence later on. Hades attacking in. Does PJ have a way to stop that? No, but it is a Gearfried. Okay, very interesting stuff. Is this a Gearfried Gravekeeper mix? Interesting. I'm not the biggest fan of Gearfried, honestly, most of the time. I feel like he's kind of awkward. MST on the back row, and that is a Nobleman, so not the best there. But MST going to eat another back row as well. Seems like PJ is doing some cleaning duty here. Ring on the Hades, it looks like. Maybe because they figured that PJ might have like a Snatch Steal or something that they're trying to clear the way for. But even so, this is a pretty good trade for PJ, because they do clear that Hades, which is quite annoying. We know that they do have a Sangan, so, yeah. And GeoMyVS saying Snatch. Do we know about the Snatch or not? Maybe they do, because they might have used a hand rip to see it, so, yeah, but that Sangan's going to hit in. This does also say that GeoMyVS' last back row is probably not MST or Dust Tornado. Not that it necessarily would be, because double MST's in grave already. But we at least now know that, like, if they had that, they probably would have just saved it to use on the Snatch and just traded Ring into the Snatch if the MST was hit by MST. But yeah, Tomato attacking into that Sangan. PJ taking 400. Again, both players very even life point totals. PJ getting in search of the Lily there. And GeoMyFS setting 1. Lily kind of awkward into Tomato, because Tomato can kind of run it down a bit. But if you just set the Lily, that can be good. PJ thinking here. They're thonking. Deciding what to do. It is actually a pretty big think, I would say. Especially like whether you set the Lily or summon out and attack. No Mirror Force has been used up on GeoMyFS's part, so you might just want to like set the Lily and leave it at that. But Knock has also, I believe, not really been used up by GeoMyFS. So Warrior Returning Alive, very interesting pick there. Going for Exile to then pop the Tomato. So that worked out very well for PJ here. So that will get rid of that Tomato quite nicely. And PJ is going to pass back to GeoMyFS. Oh, they bring out a Lily of their own, and that is a brutal Lily here, because now GeoMyFS has one payment left on it. PJ does not. 650 life points is a rough one. Gets them out of pre-mat range if they've got pre-mat. So, yeah, it's a bit tricky here. Setting the Lily might be the move here. Rhoda can be good, but Rhodaing for Exiled opens yourself up to a loss because then you just lose if they draw another monster. So you don't necessarily want to do that. This could just be to deck thin. I don't know how many warriors they have left, but I feel like if I was PJ, I would just, well, I guess you could set Gearfried as well. But I'd probably set the Lily because Lily didn't really do anything for you anymore. But yeah, they're going to set one. Are they going to set a back row as well? Nope, they're just going to pass. Okay. They're a bit light on back row. That's why I maybe would have held the Rhoda. Maybe you set the Rhoda as a bluff. Because, again, they've gone through 2 MST. So, like, they don't necessarily have more. But yeah, the Exiled Force will wrap it up. So that's going to do it for game 1. Seems like GM Life is going to win that one. Let's dive into, if we can, RunFromRed versus Wagamuffin, because this is on game 3, so we want to see what both players are playing. Seems like both players are playing some jars, which is not necessarily a standard pick in this format. The jars can be very good, though. Seems like RunFromRed also playing Newdoria, so they're playing a tomato control sort of deck. And Wagamuffin, I don't really know what they're playing. They might be just playing a more standard good stuff deck, but with the jar in there as well. Very interesting card to include here. Cyber Jar can be a bit risky in this format. Same with Morphing Jar because you accelerate into your opponent's power cards as well, right? So if you play poorly, your opponent can have initiative to just do a ton of stuff there. But Exiled Force, they're getting rid of the set, or maybe not. Let's see. How do they get the search there? Was that for a different thing? Oh, Chain Energy. Brutal. So it seems like RunFromRed is playing a bit of a burn deck here as well. Or maybe they're just taking it in as a bit of a burn control card. Because if you get your opponent down low enough, then you basically turn every resource into a burn, which can be pretty good. We got Yu-Gi-Oh! Watching. That's pretty crazy. The Yu-Gi-Oh! Itself. Graceful Charity kind of awkward here into Chain Energy because basically you're getting Graceful to get another card, but you're basically wasting 500 life points to do that kind of. It's kind of weird against burn decks. If you're just playing a pure burn deck that's, not going to be attacking into you and whittling down your life points, you generally don't want to play your draw cards. But if you're playing a burn deck that is going to be getting aggressive against you, you do want to be playing those draw cards early to see what you can get to try and deal with this. But it is kind of unfortunate that they have to go for the Graceful here. Rhoda, another card you don't really want to play against a burn deck because it's just like, yeah, I'm paying 500 to get a card I actually want to play. So basically turning a card into 1,000. Dark Hole here is going to try and eat away the whole board. RunFromRed thinking about whether to potentially negate that probably. Either with Io or maybe Solemn, although Solemn is really rough here. Ceasefire chaining instead, so this does deal a bit of burn damage, even though they're losing their monsters. Revealing Moth and Spy. So that'll be 500 for each, so 1,000 to Wagamuffin total. So now Wagamuffin is lower in life than RunFromRed. But they still have a normal summon that they can do here to try and poke in and get the life points back down a bit. Yata is the normal. Yata will be very good if it gets in here. Although it's kind of awkward because Yata in this situation is not actually lethal. Like normally when Yata comes down on an empty board state, basically, it's like, oh, that's going to be the end of the game. Here, it's kind of awkward because the Chain Energy makes it so the Wagamuffin has to pay 500 each turn to bring out that Yata. So you can't just do that infinitely, right? Nightmare Wheel getting flipped up to stop the attack, but it will be destroyed once Yata leaves the field. Still worth it, though, because you get another draw here. Wagamuffin still in battle, so maybe they've got an MST that they might use on the Nightmare Wheel. But I feel like if they had MST, they would have used that early. Oh, they are doing it on the Nightmare Wheel. That's big. That is big. Okay, yeah. Very good stuff there. I think very good use of that MST. They were probably debating like saving that for the Chain Energy after going for this play. But I do think that was a very important use of the MST. Because if RunFromRed's last 2 cards don't do anything here, then Wagamuffin is in a winning position. So like you have to kind of think like, okay, do I eventually get into the spell and trap removal I need in 6 turns here? Well, I guess now 5, if that back road doesn't do anything against Chain Energy. So, yeah, very interesting game state. Very interesting stuff. Chain Energy and an anti-Yatagarasu tech is kind of neat as well. But yeah, RunFromRed not able to draw here. They do have MST in the end phase to pop that set, which is a Ring of Destruction, which is debatably, like, I don't necessarily know if I would have set the ring there, because it debatably doesn't do anything against what RunFromRed would have. Because they bring out a monster to attack in, like, you're still taking that damage. So, like, you don't necessarily want to do that. But they are going to go for an MST here on the Chain Energy, get rid of that. Well, you have an at 2200 though. Oh, there's the knock and there's the Yata. So that is indeed the perfect combo there. Very good stuff. Very interesting gameplay. I think that MST was probably drawn off the top because otherwise you probably would have used MST to either clear up that back row or just pop the Chain Energy earlier. But yeah, very interesting stuff there. So I want to dive back into Clemens versus Juan because it's probably game 3, and it's indeed game 3. Yata, or not Yata, Fiber Jar coming in here. So they're wondering how to put back cards. There is a button on Fiber, so if you like scroll on Fiber, there's like a macro at the top that says, you know, shovel back everything, and it looks like they are going to do that. So Fiber are pretty clutch there because Juan was in a pretty bad spot. Otherwise, it looked like. However, Clemens does have initiative with the 5 cards they get, so if they get into a hand rip, they can use that. But life points are low enough that if you pay 1,000 for a hand rip, like let's say you don't draw Forceful, but you get into Duo or Comfy, you are putting yourself into a pretty risky position. And also, if they have normal summon this turn, they're opening themselves up to potentially taking a fair bit of damage here. So if you have a hand rip, it's probably still worth it, but it is kind of more awkward than it might be otherwise. Mirage coming down, along with some back row. Oh, they did not want to activate MST there, I assume. Yeah, that was a misclick. Pretty clear misclick, though. So, you know, I think it's fine. I'll leave it at that. But, yeah, it's going to be pretty good here for Clemens, potentially. So, drawing 3 if Juan does not have an out to that. But they do need to have the out, so they're going to get rid of that Mirage and make it so that Clemens can't draw into more things that might be good here. Graceful Charity is going to be good as well. Maybe they draw into a Harpies and just get a ton of value here. No IO probably because IO is not flipped up there. So you definitely flip up IO on a Graceful. Pitching a Comfy makes sense. With such low life points, it doesn't really make sense to just trade 1 for 1 on the last card Clemens has in hand. And pitching a Change as well. Going for a Pot of Greed here, drawing 2. So a lot of draw power here, which could potentially, you know, swing the game in Juan's favor here. Painful as well. Now, Painful Choice, bit of a tricky card to use in these pre-chaos formats, but there are still a lot of good cards that do get value in Grave. So, depending on what you've got in hand, you can sort of sculpt a winning play here with Painful as well. That's another thing you can do. Sending a fair amount of monsters, a Reborn as well. A Reaper, that'd be pretty good, ripping that last card from hand. I wonder if the last one will be a Rhoda to potentially go into Dawn. Looks like a Moth as well. So if you are Clemens here, what are you picking out of these monsters? For me personally, I would probably pick the Tomato, honestly. Although you could pick the Gemini Elf because, like, it's still a 3-turn clock either way. I would maybe pick the Tomato because it still keeps me in Lily range. If I draw into Lily attacking the Tomato, that's GG. So yeah, I mean, Tomato's awkward because it keeps field presence on Juan's side of the field, but it can be a risky proposition for Juan to actually summon that out and try attacking in. So I would probably give them Tomato. It looks like Clemens is indeed going to give them the Tomato there. Send the remaining cards to Grave. And if Juan wants to get aggressive, they are opening themselves up to a bit of risk. They could potentially also just set the Tomato and be like, okay, this gives me field presence. But yeah, it looks like they're going to set a card, set another one, and pass back. So that might be the Tomato, might not. Either way, Clemens not preemptively MSTing in end phase. But they are going to set 2, pass back. Could be a Morphing Jar. Hey, PJ, how you doing? Okay, it looks like PJ lost to GeoMyFS. But very interesting deck. So that was like a Gearfried, like, Gravekeeper mashup, which is neat. I feel like the 2 decks don't really play well together, honestly, but very, very cool to see Gearfried in that deck. But yeah, Fiber Jar here could be the end of the game. All Clemens needs to do is just draw a monster with over 1,600 attack, which there are a fair amount of those in the format. So, yeah, it looks like it might be GG here. Very good draw off of Fiber Jar as well. Drawing Fiber Jar off Fiber Jar, very nice. But we'll have to see what they get. This isn't necessarily the end of the game. Rhoda actually will make it probably the end of the game. Although, you know, if they're not playing Gearfried, that'd be Dawn. Yeah, I mean, that's why I'm never really a big fan of Gearfried decks. Because I feel like Gearfried, it's very much like you draw one part of the deck or not the other, and then just you lose automatically. So it's kind of rough. Yeah, Yata Lock. It always hurts to get Yata locked, but I do feel like that was a very interesting Yata lock because like the chain energy was up, so it wasn't like necessarily a pure Yata lock until they drew into the out for that. But unfortunately, they did have the out for that, so it was kind of rough. But yeah, Dawn ripping away a Dark Hole is kind of rough. Dark Hole would have been nice removal here. Pot still getting 2 draws is kind of nice, and Juan is still in it at 200 life points. It's definitely not the best position to be in, but they are still here. You know, they're still holding on. Bazoo coming down. Bazoo cannot banish spell traps in this format, so it's just going to attack in to the Dawn. That will clear it, though. So this is Yata format, ATA 2012. This is the format for Worlds 2003, which took place over the summer of 2003. And it's a very, very cool format. It's sort of the DM era at its peak, in my opinion. So it's just very fun. And even if you don't want to play these sort of typical just good stuff pile, there are other decks that have done well, like Gravekeeper's list has done well in the past. Burn lists have done well in the past. A lot of very interesting stuff that you can bring to this format. And you do get like very grindy back and forth games like we're seeing here. Oh, that knock might be the end. Yep. Okay, that is the end. Yeah, knock plus tomato. That's going to do it. But very, very good games here. Really, really close stuff. Yeah, very cool. So we're going to be moving on to see the next game we've got here, which will be Wagamuffin versus the winner of Transom and Clemens. Do people still play this format like Edison? Are there tournaments for this? There will be a tournament happening in the YGO from Zero Discord server for this, but unfortunately, it doesn't happen as common as Edison format, and you don't generally see the big numbers like Edison formats draw, but it is still a fun time. And I do think that like smaller formats with enough, plays and enough people playing them can get to the level of Edison eventually. It just does take people giving them some love and, playing them. But I do think that also when you have a format like this, there's a lot more room for experimentation. Not to say that Edison does not have experimentation. I mean, we've seen in the past like year or so with decks like Gigavise and Forks doing so well that there's still more innovation to be done in those formats. But if you think about how labbed out those formats have been over the course of time, compared to how labbed out Yata's been, which is not very much, it shows that there probably is a lot of innovation to be done in this format as well. So if you want to really dive into a format that's very like underexplored, it's a very fun experience to play. And also a smaller tournament means that, you might have a better shot at winning an event too, which is kind of fun if you're in it for that reason. But yeah, if at the end of the day you care about good gameplay, I think Yata has that in spades as well. So very, very fun stuff. That's sort of my pitch for Yata. I think it's like one of the best encapsulations of the DM era in terms of like gameplay. The gameplay feels back and forth. A lot of powerful cards running around. But it's sort of the syndrome meme where like if everyone has a power card, no one does. Where like they balance themselves out to make it so that like you're never just losing the game on the spot if your opponent opens a bunch of power cards. But yeah, very, very cool stuff. GMYFest says they're still cooking in this format, and GMYFest has done actually a lot of cooking in this format over the events we've had for it. Very, very good chef here, and we'll get to see more of them in the locals here because they're going to be in the finals versus the winner of Wagamuffin and Clemens here. So Clemens has to face down a Gemini Elf and a back row, which is a pretty formidable start here. Using a Dark Hole to clear the Gemini Elf, but the IO is going to come down and stop that. IO, I will say, is a bit of a problematic card. I think of all the power cards, IO is the most problematic because it shuts down a complete, type of card in your deck, which is kind of rough. But there are enough tools to sort of play around IO to an extent. I mean, if you have MST, that's a way to just deal with it on activation. But if you don't, there are enough cards that can sort of stall out in terms of monsters that basically force your opponent into a situation where they have to just constantly burn themselves or let you play your spells. So I do think there are ways to play around it. Also, Dust Tornado is a card in this format. If you really hate IO, you're like, I'm going to play more outs to it in the main. But yep, see there, that's what I'm talking about. Reaper coming down. So like, how do you deal with a Reaper with IO up? It's a lot tougher than you might expect. So yeah, Alpha 2 also is a big cook in this format. Jinzo, also another way to deal with IO here. Jinzo coming down, shutting off that IO, then Snatch Steal is open up, so you can take the Dawn, attack over the Gemini Elf with the Jinzo, Dawn attacks indirectly, rips a card out of hand, and just like that, Clemens is back into it, even while the Wagamuffin had the IO. So, yeah, Yata and Fiber are both underexplored. Yep, Fiber is a format that does get a bit more tournaments than Yata does, but they're both around the same time period, so similar innovations can carry over from one to the other. Although they do have enough differences to make them, considerably different, right? Like, Fiber has double Graceful Charity, for instance. It also doesn't have things like Dawn's Luke and Spirit Reaper, so there's a lot less monsters that can hand rip. But it is still a very fun format. I think both formats are really good. So, but yeah, Hada's very cool card that we saw earlier. Just going through from the previous chats here. So yeah, I'm glad to see people trying out Hades, because I feel like most people, when they go for a tree monster, they just go for Jinzo. But Hades into a Fiber Jar, into a Sangan, into a Witch. There are a lot of things that Hades is very good into. Yeah, Wagmuffin's in a tricky spot here. Without the Raigeki, they lose their way to really clear the Jinzo and the Dawn. Tomato will be very good at clearing that Dawn. So you can go Tomato into Dawn. I don't know if they're playing Newdoria. If they're playing Newdoria, then that could be a way to out the Jinzo as well. But we'll have to see here. Snatch on the Jinzo. Oh, okay. I guess two people can play at this. So you go Tomato into Dawn. If you're playing another Dawn in the deck, you bring out that Dawn, and that's 3,800 into Clemens, and then you also rip that last card out of hand. If you don't have the Dawn, you can still go into a Reaper. Oh, or you just go for Change of Heart there, and then you get in for a ton of damage this way. I'm not sure how I feel about the Change of Heart being used here. I feel like it would have been better just to go Tomato into Dawn, bring out Reaper, or just bring out another Dawn if you've got it. But I guess Clemens didn't know about the Change of Heart, but I don't know. Yeah, I understand that some people don't like the hand rip aspect of Yata, but I do feel like, I don't know, I sort of feel like it adds another element to the game, right? And you still do have hand rip cards in Fiber. Like, you do have the hand rip spells running around. But like, I feel like adding hand rip monsters just adds different dimension to play and different things to have to play around. So I do like that aspect to it, but yeah, I don't know. I personally would have just crashed Reaper or crashed Tomato into Dawn, get out the Reaper, rip the card out of hand, and then you've got the Change of Heart. If they draw into another monster, then you can make an aggressive push on the following turn. So I think that adds up to more damage total. So yeah, I'm not really the fan of Wagamuffin's play there. And if you go for Reaper too, then that means that, like, even if Clemens has like Change of Heart plus another thing, then like you're still feeling fine. But yeah, now Witch gets a search here, so Witch searches into like maybe Fiber Jar. But yeah, it's just kind of, yeah, I mean, we'll see how this works out. Like, maybe this will work out, but I am not the most, I mean, I don't know. Clemens at 2,800 life points, so there is a chance that Wagamuffin can just beat them down quick enough. But I don't know, feels a bit iffy to me. Exiled Force is the search here, so that we'll be able to deal with the Jinzo or deal with the Tomato, and then you have spell and trap removal to deal with the Jinzo. Yeah, Wagamuffin setting another back row there, playing into Harpies, but like, if they have Harpies, then things are much more dire for Wagamuffin here. Exiled Force coming down. That's going to pop the Jinzo, interestingly enough. So now IO's back online. MST being used in response to that, partially because, if Jinzo's gone, then that's probably a trap in the back row. Partially because the MST will be shut off once the IO's back up. And it looks like Clemens is going to pass back. So Clemens is in kind of a rough spot here. They do have 3,800 life points, which is pretty low. They're dropping down to 2,400. And that IO is still up. So their spells are shut off. Clemens setting 2 more, passing back. So that could be a trap there. Could also be Fiber Jar in the set monster for a zone here. But there are a bunch of different things that set monster could be. Could even be a Donzalug, and so that makes it risky to attack in with the Tomato here. I'm paying another 700, so that might mean that they don't have the most spells in hand. Tomato attacking in to the Donzalug, so that is the risk there. And Dom will be able to rip a card out of hand. So, again, like, this is another thing where it's like, I like having the added dimension of like, oh, I shouldn't attack him with Tomato potentially because it could be a Dawn, right? So like I maybe want to leave that set as opposed to in Fiber format where it's like if they've got a set monster, you're probably just going to attack into it either way because it's going to work out. Like if it's Fiber Draw, you want that triggered on your turn. If it's Sangan or Witch, you want that search to go off now so that way you know what they're getting for later. Although I guess there are arguments that you don't want it to go off, but still I feel like it is, you know, generally the move in Fiber if your opponent is set monster and you want to get aggressive just to attack into that monster. But here there are risks to that, as we saw. Io going away is kind of scary. Jinzo coming down. It's very interesting that they went for dropping the Io with the Jinzo up. And maybe they felt like, you know, if Clemens had a Solemn, that would be bad. But I feel like, I don't know, I feel like Solemn had not really played as much in this format. Maybe it should be. Maybe that's something to experiment with later. But I don't know. I'm not necessarily sure about that play. They're going to pitch a Forceful and a Zumbira there, and then attack into the Dawn. Clemens in kind of a rough spot. But if they can clear the Jinzo, okay, no, that's the end of the game. So, very, very good stuff there. Oh, and that's the only game going on, so we'll just keep on that. Yeah, I did have some minor critiques of play here and there, but I do think that sometimes, even if you don't play like the most optimally, and not to say that White Mountain didn't play the most optimally, like I can also be wrong. Like I am fallible. I do get things wrong occasionally. Actually more than occasionally, oftentimes. I do get things wrong, right? But I do think that it did make sense to keep the IO up. The only way that would be stopped is if they have Solemn. But again, Solemn didn't really played as much in the format. And if Clemens did have powerful spells there that had just been shut off by the IO that whole time, then it wouldn't have really worked out for them. And also I feel like Wagman had the life points where like if Clemens did have to use a Solemn there and then, you know, they were worried about, oh, I've got Graceful in hand with IO up, you just set the Graceful and be fine there probably. But yeah, Chain of Heart on the set, tribute for a Jinzo. It's a very good starting play. Jinzo attacking in, you know, the traps are shut off. That's going to do 2,400 damage there. And Clemens in kind of a rough spot. I mean, it's not the end of the world, but oh, MST on the back row is a pretty good sign here. MST cannot be used this way in Yata format. That was something that I don't think it can be used this way in Yata format. That's a Fiber format thing, not a Yata format thing. I mean, they're going with it, I guess, but I'm pretty sure that it can't. Like, I'm 99% sure that it can't. But maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Yeah, I'm not the voice of gospel in all retro Yu-Gi-Oh, unfortunately. I need a bit more subscribers to become that. But even if I had all the subscribers in the world, you know, humans are humans no matter how big of a following they have, no matter how big a voice in the community they have. So, okay, yeah, so the MST thing would not have worked that way. I mean, they've gone with it, I guess. So, like, you would argue, like, accepted game state, but it is good to know for the future. Yeah, use the OCG rulings, which was different there. So, yeah, I was pretty sure Yata was the format where that went back to normal. Just like with the Bazoo Kaiku stuff, where those can't banish anything from Grave. But, yeah, ended with Fiber. But yeah, I think it did switch in the TCG, but there was a brief period in the TCG where, like, you can maybe do that here. But yeah, quick play spells did not work the same way as in Fiber. It's weird that there was a period in the game's history where it did work that way, where you could activate them the turn they were set. But yeah, that was like from Treasure format where they were introduced to Fiber format, which is the format right before this one. But yeah, having the Rhoda versus not having the Rhoda is pretty big there, I would say. But yeah. So yeah, they took 1,400, lose a card from hand. But now they potentially get into a Zumbira. They potentially get into another Exiled. Potentially they even get into a Dawn on their own. So they've got a bunch of different options here now for what they're doing. Rhoda getting activated. They're going to get that search for a Dawn of their own. That does not bode well for Ragamuffin here. Okay, Zumbira going to come out, attack over the Dawn. And that's going to be it for the turn. But we do know about the Dawn in hand. So that Dawn can rip in for another card here. I think they activated the Rhoda because Wagamon knows about the Rhoda now. So, like, if they drew Spell Trap move, they might have used it on that. But I feel like holding the Rhoda could also have been good. Oh, that's it. Yep. Yeah. That's going to do it. GG's indeed. Yeah, that's kind of brutal. That's a very, very good combination of cards. And that can happen sometime in this format. Like I mentioned that, you know, having so many power cards make it so that it's sort of evened out. But occasionally someone does draw the perfect set of power cards, just win the game on the spot. And some people don't like that as much. I think it's generally fine because the amount of games that happen, it will sort of like balance out between you getting that and your opponent getting that. And oftentimes there are a couple turns to like prepare for weird edge cases like that. But yeah, it's kind of awkward. Like you could argue that that here if you set the Dawn, right, as opposed to something out Zamira, you know, like they wouldn't have necessarily had a lethal push there. Oh, actually, they would have had the lethal push with like Jinzo into the set, and then attack him with Lily and Dawn. So that would have done it actually. But I'm just bringing this up to say that there are always things to play around, right? Like if you know the Snatch Steal is still in the deck, you can play around that potentially until you have ways to stop it. So yeah, but it is definitely a bit tricky to play around everything, right? That is one of the downsides where like you have to choose what to play around versus not playing around. And unfortunately, if you choose wrong, that's just the end of the game a lot of the time. But yeah, that's how it goes sometimes. That's Yu-Gi-Oh! In a variety of formats, you know? Like even in like formats like Edison, for instance. Sometimes you have to play around Gore. Sometimes you have to not play around Gore. Sometimes you have to play around BrainCon. Sometimes you have to play around, like, there are things that you always have to make a choice. Like, if they have this, I lose. But, you know, I sort of have to just go into it not playing around this. Or if they don't have this, then, you know, like, you always have to make those decisions. So, I think it's not necessarily specific to Yata format. But I think the last game should be starting soon. Yep, Wagamuffin's hosting for GMYFS. So, yeah, this has been a pretty fast locals. We're under an hour right now. But Yata format is actually a relatively fast format. I think it's something that people often don't realize is that the speed of the game does change in different eras, right? Like, there are 5Ds era formats that are slower than Yata format. And there are DM formats that are, like, there are slow formats in the DM era, fast formats in the DM era, just like there are slow formats in every era and fast formats in every era. You see that in GX as well, where you have some of the faster formats, like the Stein formats, versus a slower format, like I would say Chimera Tech's a slower format personally. You see that in 5Ds. Like I'd say Edison's a pretty slow format, all things considered, although Gigafies and Forks are pushing the definition of that, so maybe that will change in the future. But I still think that Edison is a grindy enough format that like you do get a fair amount of turns most games. So I'd call that a slower format. And then you have something like Cat format or Frog format, which are just like crazy amounts of turbo. So like the rate of play for the game changes depending on, you know, the format itself, not necessarily the era you're in. And you even see modern formats sometimes where some modern formats are slower than others. So it's a bit tricky. But yeah, PC also another good slower paced format. So Heartbeat's Feather Duster coming down. That will get IO'd. So IO shutting that off. So good use of IO there. Did force out the IO though. So if GMYFS doesn't want that IO up, they might just have to let it drop here. Dust Tornado on the back row though. So again, Dust Tornado being a card that can get some good value here. Both in just sniping the back row and also hitting your opponent's IOs as well. GMYFS thinking about whether to keep that IO up or let it drop. And that is a very, very big decision. It can shut down a lot of what Wagamuffin's doing. But, you know, if you've got like a knock in hand, you're like, oh, do I use that knock here to just get rid of the set, get aggressive? Looks like they're going to bide their time a bit, just passing back to Wagamuffin, which I think is probably a fine decision. But we'll have to see if it pans out for them. Yeah, tier games, exactly. They can go really, really long, even though it's over the course of like 1 or 2 turns. I think what matters in a game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is not the amount of turns you have, but the amount of actions you take. And some people will disagree with me on that. Some people will say, like, no, I actually want, like, a lot of turns, so I get a lot of normal summons and a lot of thoughts about, like, how to use up my normal summons, for instance, or sets, or things like that. But I do feel like it just, you know, I feel like actions matter most for me, you know. Which is why, like, for instance, people who like a lot of turns in games don't necessarily like playing against stall decks, because stall decks aren't necessarily about, like, oh, I'm going to take this amount of turns. They're about just shutting off your actions, right? So you do less actions in a long game of stall than you would in a shorter game of modern, right? Well, you take more action in a modern format in general, but like, you know what I mean? Like a stall game that goes on for like 40 turns is not necessarily going to be as fun to people who like longer games as something that takes place over the course of a couple turns, but have a lot of meaningful interaction and meaningful decisions that you can make with your actions. So, yeah. Change of heart on probably the Hottest. Yep, there's the Hottest. And then Lily, that is the end of the game. 1250 plus 3400 plus 11. Not quite the end of the game, but it is a lot of damage coming in. So, yeah, this is a very aggressive push. But Raigeki here, so that actually 45 plus 24. Yeah, that will be not the end of the game. 6950. So, yeah, it's getting really close, though. I do think this is still a good move on Wagamuffin's part, because you drop GeoMyFS to a point where, like, oh, well, Ring actually does make it the end of the game if there's no book. Yeah, so that's just going to do it. Yeah, Book of Moon is in the format, so it is a possibility to show off Ring, but a lot of people don't play Book because it's just like, it's actually kind of weak compared to a lot of the other cards in the format. I do like Book a lot, though. I think there are arguments to be playing Book over things like Mirror Force or TT or things like that, just because they are more flexible. And yeah, I know that sounds crazy because Mirror Force or TT can get you a lot of value, but I do think the Book is very good. Although arguing, on the flip side, IO's in the format, so Book shut down by IO, TT, Mirror Force are not done. But yeah, that was a pretty interesting game there. But yeah, a very quick game as well. So we might see this match end before the hour mark, which would be kind of funny. GeoMyVest going first, though. They're going to go for pot, draw 2. Comfy, rip a card out. What are they going to rip? Oh, that is a busted hand. Okay, what do you rip from this hand? Well, it really depends on what GeoMyFS has in hand. If you've got MST, you got that for IO, so you can cut that off. And then Graceful's probably best, but they are going to get rid of the IO there. So that means that they don't really have an out to it, and they probably have a bunch of powerful spells in hand as well. But that Graceful can be brutal here, because Graceful gets rid of a lot of the hand knowledge you have. So it makes it kind of tricky. GeoMyFS just setting 1, passing back. So no IO from GeoMyFS. Letting Wagmuffin just go for the Graceful here. But that would mean that GeoMyFS had a lot of good spells in hand. Otherwise, they probably would have hit the Graceful. I don't think there's a hand that Wagmuffin can sculpt to win here. I don't think they win the game on the spot. But I could be wrong. But yeah, I can't think of what that hand would be. Painful here, that might help them get a hand like that. Getting a bunch of things engraved, and also getting a card to hand from that. But of course, GeoMyFS gets to pick the card. I think Painful is actually... I know Painful gets a bad rap. Where people are like, oh, Painful is like the most busted card in the world. I think Painful actually is a very skill-intensive card. Because both in terms of like what you have to send and what your opponent has to pick, it tests the skill of both players. And it can really be like a make or break card. Like if you are very good with Painful, you can just win the game on the spot. If you are not as good with Painful, then it can really just hurt you, right? And so that makes it a very interesting card. And I've actually seen people cut the card from their deck in certain formats, just saying it's not worth it. Not worth it to have in this format, But I think in Yata, it definitely is worth it. It's just very tricky to play with. Sending Mirage, Knock, Forceful, Comfy, and Pot. That could imply a couple things. It could imply that they've got Duo in hand. It could imply that they cut Duo for the siding, because they knew they were going second. Yeah, this is an interesting one. They could have MST, so, like, do you give them the Mirage? Do you give them the knock and let them just get rid of your set? That is a big thinker here, honestly. Could just give them pots, saying, like, well, you've gone through a lot of your power cards. Just take 2 more. But yeah, they are going to go for Mirage. I think that makes sense because GeoMyF has the most ability to counterplay against that. Although, because they took the IO, we do know that or we don't know for sure, but we have a pretty strong read that GeoMyF did not have an MST. So that does make Mirage a pretty safe bet here for Wagamuffin. They're going to go for the duo, so they do need to have it in the deck. They just had it in hand. And the duo is going to rip out 2 cards, so it's going to rip out Air Knight Parshath, pretty cool tribute monster there, and a Moth. So Change of Heart on the set. We knew about Change of Heart from the Coffee. And they can flip up a Spy. So interesting that they set the Spy into a known Change of Heart, but maybe they know that Wagamuffin is not playing Gravekeepers. But yeah, it's going to get in for a fair bit of damage. Set a card, Mirage, and then pass back. So pretty good turn for Wagamuffin here. But again, oh, they do have the MST. Very interesting. They must have drawn that just now. Very, very good draw, if that is the case. MST hitting the unknown set, saying, I'm going to let you have your Mirage, draw into whiffs, and then not be able to clear it. Because we do know about Mirror Force as well. So, like, yeah, so I guess one an unknown set. But, like, this does allow GeoMyF to get aggressive here if they want to. So now Wagamuffin gets to draw 4. But will they be able to keep that 4? They're going to go for Dark Hole here on GeoMyF's side of things. And then summon out a Witch. Premat as well. What are they going to... Oh, Premat for Parshath. Okay, I see the vision. I see the vision. 3,000 damage attacking in. Getting a draw here. So this actually worked out pretty well for GeoMyF. And they're going to pass back to Wagamuffin with a card in hand. They do have the MST, so MST will clear the Mirage. But now both players are at 4 cards. So, you know, it is sort of an even situation. Oh, that's going to be rough, though. Raigeki and Dawn. Oof. Yeah, that's unfortunate. It might have been better here for GeoMyF to just sort of switch the Spy to defense, get rid of the Mirage, and leave it at that. But this is not looking good. Dawn attacking in. If Tomato sticks around, then that's going to be very good for GeoMyF because you can crash into the Dawn, get out another Dawn or something from your deck, but it looks like the Tomato is the one to fall there. So, Reborn, though. Reborn going to be very good. Going for Air Knight Parshath, a.k.a. the AFK. Yeah, I mean, if that clears the Dawn, then you're in a very good spot here. People don't really play Battle Traps except for Mirror Force in this format. Now there really are some, because Sacred to Armor comes out in Dark Crisis, so that's not even around. But yeah, very good stuff here. We know the Change of Heart is gone. There could be a Snatch Steal in Wagamuffins' possession, which would be very good for them to snatch the Parshath attack into the set monster. But we'll have to see what happens here. Rhoda is going to be pretty decent. You can Rhoda for Exile, pop the Parshath, and it looks like that is what they're going to do. Yeah, you can't let that Parshath ride. Reborn on probably Parshath. Yep, there we go. Oh, man, that's a good combo there. Parshath into the set. It might be Spy. That is something to worry about, but it looks like it is Magician of Faith. Magician of Faith potentially gets GeoMyF back into this thing. Reborn's a good one. Pot's a good one. Snatch is a good one, too. Snatch is kind of risky if there's an MST or a Dust Tornado in the back row, but if there is not, then it potentially gets you back into the game. I may have gone Reborn as the safer option, just guaranteed get rid of the Parshath, but this does leave you with a body, so you're more likely to survive here. So I do think this was probably the right choice in the end. It does get GeoMyF a draw. They're going to set 1, set another, pass back. Ring also becomes a draw in this situation. Well, actually, it's not a draw anymore because Snatch gives 1,000 life points. But GeoMyF had a ring in the back row. Could have been a draw there. Very intense stuff. Again, we know Snatch is still in the deck. So if Wagamuffin has Snatch for the Parshath, then that could be the end of the game. But it looks like they do not. So I think GeoMyF is win con here. Oh, they're going to flip up Tomato into a TT. I would not have done that. I would have just attacked him with the Parshath, but oh no, they don't have anything else there. I did their thing like, okay, well, you know, what are the odds they've got TT specifically? But I probably would have just gone for the Parshath in because you're in a situation where like you can just keep doing that. Mirage coming down. It's gonna be pretty good there. I guess the argument against keeping the tomato set is that, like, you know, if Wagman does draw an MST, then that's the end of the game as well. But I don't know. I would have gotten greedy with the Parchat and just been like poke, poke, poke. You know, call here can be pretty good depending on what it gets back. Going for the Dawn. That will be lethal if it connects. No TT. But there is a Mirror Force. So Mirror Force popping that. But a Ring on the Dawn. Raigeki Break on the Dawn as well. Okay, so this is getting intense. Yeah, hitting that Dawn to stop the Ring from killing. And that was a very, very cool interaction. I think Wagamuffin is still in a good spot, though, because Jumaivez needs MST exactly, or else the Mirage pitches the entire hand. Oh, rough. That's rough. Wagamuffin has a monster, then that's the end of the game. Fiber Jar, normal summon Fiber Jar for game. Yeah, very, very cool stuff. Yeah, I probably would have just attacked him with Parchat. I think if Jumaivez had just kept attacking in with Parchat, they would have probably won the game. But, you know, it really does depend. Like, I can see the argument for not attacking him with that and just, you know, sort of, you know, trying to get the lethal shot in that one turn because TT's a one of, so like, it has to be TT exactly. But I probably would have played it slightly differently. But that's the great thing about Yata format. There are major decisions that you have to make to determine like what you play around and whether you win or lose. And so I think that's a really, really fun thing about this format. So yeah, very, very cool stuff. Very happy the tournament ended that way because of very, very hype. And also it goes back to a previous comment where Prada says, yeah, it ended with Fiber. That was in a completely different context, but this locals did end with Fiber. So very, very cool stuff. Anyways, if you like what you saw here, head over to the YGO0 Discord server, link in the description down below. We're going to be having a monthly tournament with this coming up next weekend. So I'll be creating that and posting information about that in the Discord later today. So look forward to that. And yeah, Wagamuffin summed up Fiber Jar for game. That's what happened. So very, very cool stuff. Very, very intense game here. Yeah, I love this format a lot just for games like this. Very, very cool. But yeah, I hope you all enjoyed as always, and I will see you all next time. Look forward to the Lightsworn videos that are going to be coming out once I finally get duels for them, but you know, we'll see when I get those games or not. I'll try and get more games later tonight as well, so hopefully that will, you know, enable me to get what I need for some videos. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed as always, and until next time, I've been Ben from YGO0, signing off. Peace.